Hey friends, it's Amy from Buttercake. In this tutorial, I have this very, very detailed Victorian style cake with California wild roses. There's so much that went into this cake, and I had a ton of fun decorating it. It took me a couple hours, but of course, I love piping. So let's jump into it. Getting started with the wild roses, I have a tip 104 here. And I'm just getting my piping bag fitted over this cup. Mine has a handle. Probably be a lot easier if your cup did not have a handle. I struggled with that for a little bit. Anyways, we're doing this so that we can see the tip. You want it positioned so that when you look down into the cup, you can actually see the whole way through the tip. There you go. Because this is a two-toned petal, so I've got this very bright pink, which I use just a pink gel color in my Swiss meringue buttercream. And I'm getting it in the bag. About 2/3 of this bag is going to be the pink. And I want that to go towards the thinner end. So that when you put the white buttercream, or when I put the white buttercream in there, it's on the thicker end. So when I pipe the petals, the center of the flower is white and then it graduates to pink the further out the petals go. You can see here how it's that 1/3, 2/3 ratio. And then I'm just squeezing some out into my bowl so that I get the color pattern that I want at the tip, and I'm ready to pipe with it. There you can see that the white is starting to come out just like that. Beautiful. That's exactly what we're going for. I went ahead and got all my other tools ready. I have a flower nail here, and I cut some pieces of freezer paper. You can use parchment paper, whatever you have on hand. Little dot of buttercream just to stick the paper to the nail so it doesn't slide around, which I actually did not put enough on there. You'll see in a minute here when I have to take it off and put more on. That's okay. Mistakes happen. Piping a dot in the center with that yellow. It's fitted with a number 4 round tip. And then here is the petal buttercream bag that I prepared. And I'm attaching that wide end to the center and sort of fanning out. I'm twisting it slightly and applying different amounts of pressure as the petals unfurl, just so that I can get them to ruffle a little bit. There you can see I had to add it because it was just sliding on me. No big deal. Add a little more buttercream. Ready to go. So you can see here, as I pipe the petals, I'm turning it and bringing it back down to the center. That's a single petal. But for these double petals, it's a sort of back and forth motion while applying different amounts of pressure at different parts. So up and down, up and down. There we go. And I put about 5 petals on these flowers. That's what wild roses typically have. Going back in with that yellow in the center here to create a little bit of a cone. And then I have a scribe tool here. It's okay if you don't have a scribe tool. You could use a spatula or even a butter knife, whatever you have on hand, no big deal. I'm just creating a little bit more texture on the petals. These roses have jagged edges and curling of their petals, so I'm just trying to achieve a little more variance, make them look a little more natural. And it's okay if you take too much buttercream off, or none of it's really a mistake because flowers in nature are not perfect. So the more imperfect it looks, the more realistic it looks. Just taking my time here, adding as many touches, and then every flower comes out different. I really liked piping these particular flowers because there was really no wrong way to do it. Just finishing up with the scribe tool here, and then I'm going to take that yellow and switch it back to a number 1 round tip, which is the smallest round tip, and just piping the filaments. Just very tiny, almost hair-like bits of buttercream piped around, and I'm actually intentionally leaving the center of that cone exposed just to make it look a little more interesting and a little more like the real flowers themselves. This doesn't have to be perfectly round. I am just trying to make sure that if there's any gaps between my center cone and the petals, I just fill those in. And then once it's done, you can transfer them to a plate or a sheet tray. I just have a dinner plate here, and then I pop those in the freezer to get hard so I can transfer them to the cake later. Here I have a cake drum, and I am putting my 7-inch cake, which is on an 8-inch cake board. That's a mouthful. I did it this way because I wanted to be able to just move my cake in and out of the refrigerator a lot easier without having that big drum on the bottom. So I did just crumb coat it on the board and then attached it to the drum with a little bit of buttercream. This is my Swiss meringue buttercream, which I will provide a link for the recipe and tutorial down in the description if you're interested in that. I tinted it with some leaf green gel color and a little bit of black gel color. It looks light on the camera here because of my lighting, but as it sat in the fridge, it actually became a pretty deep shade of green. So this is the second coat, and I'm just going down the sides here with my large offset spatula, trying to get a decent amount of buttercream on the sides here. I always start on the top and then work my way down the sides. I find that to be the easiest, or really it's just the way I've always done it. Getting it on as thick as I can, and then I go back, and if there's any thin spots, I just add it on now at this point in an attempt to not have to scrape it as much. So I'm just eyeballing it, checking different spots, especially where you can see white buttercream through from the crumb coat. I will definitely go back over and add more to those spots. Now here that is a spackling knife, which works great. You can get those at a hardware store, and they're wonderful for tall cakes. Normally I use my bench scraper, but this cake was a little bit too tall. It's got 4 layers in it, 4 layers of cake. So I had to break out the spackling knife. It's got a nice sharp edge. It's about 12 inches, and it's got a nice 90-degree corner on the edge, which is what you want to look for, because some of the spackling knives actually have plastic guards on the outside, which make it really hard to use on a cake. So you want ones that don't have the guards on the edges. I'm just taking my time here, scraping around the sides. And this is real time. This is typically how slow I go, just because I think, taking the time to get the foundation of your cake really plays out in the overall look of your cake when it's all finished. So spending the time here in the beginning is worth it. And also, I just enjoy every little bit of decorating a cake. So this is fun to me. There's some low spots or thin spots that I'm going back in and filling so that we can get this smooth. Now my cake underneath was cold, so as I am icing it here, it is basically it's chilling the butter as I'm working with it, which is going to change the pigment, because temperature fluctuations with Swiss meringue buttercream change the pigment in gel colors. So you can see it's kind of like a variegated green. It's not one perfect shade of green all over, and that's because of the temperature changes, which I don't mind. I actually like how that turned out. Just taking that top edge off there, getting it really smooth, and I'm not taking too much off every time I pass my scraper over it, because it tends to push down that top edge and create a little bit of a lip. So you want to be very gentle at this part, taking off that top edge of buttercream. Then I'm just giving it a good turn and looking for any high spots or low spots and cleaning it up as best I can. You can see kind of a swirl pattern with different shades of green there. Here I'm going with a scribe, and I'm actually marking. I just picked the spot that'll be the back of my cake, essentially. And then I'm taking a ruler and marking 2 inches apart. This is going to help me place all of my decorations. So I'm just punching holes every 2 inches down at the bottom of the board. You can see there. And the last space was about 1 3/4 inches, but that's totally okay. That's going to be the back of our cake. Now I'm using this ruler to mark 4.5 inches up the cake. It depends on the height of your cake, however you want to mark it. 4.5 was the right amount for me to be able to get all my decorations on here. Taking just a small cookie cutter and placing the top of that cookie cutter right at those marks. And that cookie cutter is the size of my flowers. And so I'm piping this kind of like sunburst style. That is a number 5 round tip. So the cookie cutter is basically it's a little bit smaller than the size of my flowers. So I know that when I place my flower on there, it'll cover up the lines the cookie cutter left, but you'll still be able to see these green shells around the edges. Just piping those as evenly spaced as possible. And I did that around all of the circles. And this is more of like a olive green. So I used leaf green with a little bit of brown for that shade. Piping a dot in the center to help anchor a little bit better. And then this is the frozen, very firm buttercream rose. And I used a glove just to protect it from the heat of my hand. And you want to work quickly so that they don't melt at all and you don't leave any fingerprints. This is a 104 tip. And I'm piping from the center of one flower to the center of another. Just creating a swag. Taking my time, going as slow as I need to line them up as best that I can. Piping those the whole way around between every flower until they're all matched up. Those came out very nice. And then the next thing that I did, using the same color, this is my green mixed with black color, piped a bead border underneath those swags, just as an extra detail. Bead borders are a little more difficult just because you have to consistently apply pressure to get the ball the exact shape on every single bead. So it just takes a little bit of patience and practice. And then same color again, using a small star tip, doing a reverse shell border to cover up that top edge. Give it a little bit cleaner of a look, and just again adding more details. That was really the whole point of this cake, was just keep adding things. Here we go. And right there, trying to end those shells right at that point where the previous two swags meet. Now here I have some reddish brown. I used some brown gel color with a couple drops of red to create this shade, and I'm piping stems. And these stems are going right up over the seam to cover up where the previous swags meet. Then I wanted to add this little detail here on those flat swags to make it look like a threaded ribbon. I thought it was a really cute idea. So just spacing them apart as evenly as possible. And yeah, it just looks like you would sew through some ribbon. Nice little detail. Adding in just little pops of that brown. Piping another stem, and then I kept going the whole way around the cake. There you can see it's going right up over that seam to cover it up, so it gives us a really nice finished look. Now I'm piping side stems. Wild roses naturally have a lot of stems and branches. They're very shrub-like. So I wanted to add these on to have a place to add some foliage. Here I'm just using a little leaf tip with some of that olive green and piping very small leaves in different directions, changing up the position of my piping bag here just to get it to go up, down, left, right, all the different ways. Roses typically have about 5 leaf formations, kind of grouped together on each stem. I started out that way, and then I just kind of thought, I'll just put leaves wherever they look good. Try to balance it out as much as possible. and whatever just looked appealing. There we go. And then I decided to add just one here at the bottom of the flower to cover up where the stem meets the flower. And that looks great. And then just one down lower for balance. Here I am piping some more stems and leaves. And from flower to flower, I didn't try to make them perfectly match, just somewhat similar. Now here's a different leaf tip, and I'm piping a ruffle border here, and you can see it's covering up that cake board. So I wasn't worried about cutting the cake board or it not matching the size of the cake because I knew I was going to add these double borders. And this also really helps if you are practicing, because now I can remove that cake and just clean up my drum and reuse the drum. I don't have to cut the cake and damage the drum at all. So bonus. Piping large shell border over top of those ruffles just to clean it up. There we go. Gorgeous. And then I'm piping the same shell border on top. Applying a decent amount of pressure to build up the large part of the shell, and then stopping pressure, pulling down and away. It's okay if they're not all perfectly the same because we're going to be adding another border on the sides of those later on. So I'm not too worried about my inconsistent pressure here. I'm just kind of adding in a placeholder essentially. There we go, ending right there. Perfect. Gorgeous. Now this overlapping drop border, this is the hardest part of this cake. I'm starting here basically at the back of my cake, and I'm just picking a spot anywhere to start. And you pipe one and then go to the center and pipe one overlapping, trying to get it the same height and the same width. Now a technique like this does take practice. You will see in a minute, though, that I mess up, and that's totally normal. Even after years of piping, you still have oopsies. There's air in your piping bag, or your buttercream is melting, or whatever. There's factors at play here. That's okay, though, because drop borders like this, or any type of string work, it's actually easy to just remove and try again. It typically pulls right off if you make a mistake. So nothing to worry about. You'll see right here, that one was too low. So I just grab it with my tip and kind of lay it on my finger. Sorry, my thumb is blocking the way. And then it just pulls right off. And you can go back. Here's the end where you're matching them up. So you just want to make sure you don't forget that last little loop. There we are. Looks pretty good. And here I'm adding the other shell border in the olive green with a small star tip just to cover up any edges or imperfections here to give it more of a refined look. That's what I love about all this extra piping is if you make any boo-boos or you kind of have any unclean areas, you can just really cover them up. So because this is an uneven area, I'm just applying different amounts of pressure to each shell to either fill in spaces or pipe very thin shells to get it as even as possible. There we go. Looks pretty good. Here's that olive color again. And I just have a number 5 round tip. And this was just freestyle. And I had a lot of fun going in and doing some scroll work, which I really love doing. And when you put scroll work like this on a cake, you get better with practice over time, but it's also a little bit forgiving because there's so much to look at when you look at the cake that if you make a little bit of a boo-boo here or there, it's not that big of a deal. It's really hard to notice. It's kind of the beauty of these styles of cake. Going in with that other shade of green and piping a little rosette right there in the center. And then I went back in with the brown with the small tip and put in very small scrolls, which I really loved. how that little bit of brown popped in these empty spaces, just with like the daintiest little details. And of course I had to fill in these bottom areas with some more scrolls, taking my time. Now each section I did do roughly the same design as best I could. Piped another rosette there, and then coming back in with the brown to add the tiniest little details. They look like little commas. Then I moved to the top of the cake to fill in, doing a reverse shell up here in that olive green. The whole way around, I left a little bit of a gap between that and the larger shell border, just so it had a cleaner look. I felt like if I put it directly up against that shell border, it would have kind of dragged through that previous buttercream and made it look a little messy, so I wanted to avoid that. I just had fun here, piping on top with that brown wild rose, which is the type of flower that is on the sides. And just, practicing. It's always good to practice your writing anytime you can. It takes a lot of time to get good at writing, and some days I even still have off days. That turned out pretty okay, though. Added one more rose on top here, just for that nice little finishing touch. And of course, more scrolls. Why not, right? There's so much detail on the sides of this cake, we might as well add more to the top. Again, this was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. All in all, it was about 2 hours of piping, and then maybe 20 minutes of piping the flowers. So it was a good project. But I enjoyed it, and I hope you guys really enjoyed watching me decorate this cake. I did add, I saved that buttercream, the pink and white, and added some nice little petals that look like they fell off the flowers down here at the bottom, around the bottom border, just a little pop of color. Again, I'm all about balance. You have a little pink on the top, a little pink in the middle, a tiny bit of pink on the bottom. And it all worked out in the end. If you guys try any of these techniques out, or if you enjoyed watching, please do let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I always love getting comments. And if you haven't already subscribed, that would be awesome. It actually helps more people see these videos, more people can learn techniques, and more people can just enjoy watching me decorate cakes and bake fun things. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Take care.